Welcome, it's been a while. So I actually did record a reaction to this album on the day it was released. I had uploaded the next day and yeah, it ran into basically a block, which is the first time I've had that on this channel. I use people's songs all the time. I'm happy for it to be claimed. This one for some reason was blocked. And then a few days later I realised that some other people have managed to react to this album. But when I try to upload it again on a sort of test channel I have, all the songs except one are allowed through, and then I tried to re-upload it on my main channel here and it was blocked again. So with this in mind, I am doing a review instead of a reaction. I've got a lot to say about this album, so yeah, let's get into it. Okay, The American Dream is killing me. The opening song is also the first single off this album, and in a way it kicked things off strong back in October when it was pretty much more of a statement and more powerful than anything that had happened on, say, Father of All Motherfuckers. Honestly, I was waiting for more songs to come out before I wanted to, give judgment as to whether or not Green Day were going back into a good direction or if it was just a fluke. And in a way this paid off really well, because every subsequent single has been gradually better. I mean, I would say Dilemma maybe is the best single, but I really did actually quite like One-Eyed Bastard. My issue with this particular song is that I could immediately see all of the calculations that were going on behind it. The chorus here is like that of the song Minority, but it's missing so much of the speed and the swing that really made that chorus so much fun to just sing and bop along to. The verses are certainly better now. I particularly love the lopsided hook, and I just love how in literally the first two lines we get so much of what contemporary Green Day is about, or 21st century Green Day, so including American Idiot and 21st Century Breakdown. And in literally a minute in, we get this bit where the song slows down and Billy is singing very sweetly over these strings, and it's over literally as soon as it starts. It's, I think it's 1:01 it comes in, and 1:14 it's out of there. It's almost like the band are trying to rush through as many of the sort of American Idiot tropes as they can in a short space of time. Of course, Green Day have long since mastered the art of songwriting, and the melody of this little slow down bit is actually a brilliant setup, because it kind of comes back in the solo towards the end of the song, and it's a great sort of payoff. It's just a shame that the song ends up on that chorus, which honestly by the time I've heard it towards the end of the song I'm a little bit tired of it. Then we get Look Ma No Brains. This was the second single off the album. It's also the second track in. It is the first time in a while that it feels like the same band who wrote Dookie and Insomniac, and it's really welcome. It's 2 minutes of moderately fast pop punk with a Ramones-like energy, and even though I haven't really got much else to say about it, it was around the time that Look Ma No Brains came out and that I started to actually get excited for this album. Now, Bobby Socks is an interesting one. If YouTube would allow me to share just one section of my reaction, I would share this one, because at the beginning of this song I was not sold at all, and by about 2 minutes in I'd completely flipped, and it's ended up being one of my favourite songs on the album. Hearing those opening chords and lines, I was pretty much turned off this one. It didn't really feel like Green Day to me, but by the time we got into that second verse I started to reframe things as I was paying attention to the steady drums and the rhythm of the guitar in particular. I haven't really touched on this band that much, apart from a bit in one video, but I bloody love Weezer, especially Blue Album era Weezer, and this sounds like something that could have easily been on the Blue Album. By the time the second chorus came in, I was fully on board, and better yet, I noticed that Billy was using a very rough vocal for the choruses. This, like some of his flashier guitar playing, is something that generally only comes out live these days, so it was really nice to see that, and it comes up again later in the album as well. And speaking of flashy guitar parts, we do get another solo here. It's kind of generic, but it's got a lovely tone, and then it falls away into feedback over, just Mike Dirnt's playing. And between this and the you know, it just feels so much like classic Weezer. It reminds me in parts of Buddy Holly and also Only in Dreams. Yeah, it's a good song, this one. Now, I haven't seen much online of people comparing Bobby Socks to Weezer like I have, but I do see a lot of people comparing this next song, One Eyed Bastard, to Pink's So What, which just tells me that people pay attention more to the particular notes of a guitar part than they do to, say, the whole vibe of a song. Truthfully, it wasn't until I was editing my reaction, and by that point I must have heard it like 4 or 5 times, now I started to notice, oh wait, this actually sounds kind of familiar, but I gather that people picked up on this immediately. Now this song I quite like because Green Day have never really been able to pull off this kind of tough guy persona. Billy Joe never sings this tough guy persona particularly well. Not since the song Take Back on Nimrod have they really been able to pull it off, but this does come kind of close, and the use of the diminished second in that closing riff, as well as that kind of dark sound and piano in the verses, yeah, this one has me won over almost as much as Bobby Socks and Dilemma. And speaking of Dilemma, that's the next song, track 5. For me, this has got to be probably the strongest single they've released, not just from this album, but maybe the strongest singles they've released since Revolution Radio, and one of the strongest they've released since American Idiot. Bizarrely, it feels like something from the Uno Dos Tres trilogy, but like the really good end of that trilogy. I will continue to defend those albums, by the way. They've got a lot of good tracks sprinkled in, and like I say, this one easily could have fit in with that. The blend of heavy upbeat rock riffs and those very sweet vocals give this song a lot of its own character that stands out from the rest of this album quite well. And yeah, it fits in with, again, some of the stuff that was going on, what's this now, 12 years ago. Again, we hear Billy Joe getting a bit more shouty than he does usually on record, and the choruses are all the better for it. Can you just picture yourself bouncing in the crowd to this one as someone chucks £8 worth of beer up in the air and it just lands all over you? Good times. So 1981 was the first peak of the new album, if I'm not mistaken. Way back in, I think, September or so, there was a live performance of it. It's nostalgic in both title and sound, and it really proves that the trio can still pull something from their Kaplunk days. It instantly feels good, like a wave of early 90s pop punk. Very fast instruments, summery vocals. Honestly, I just wish it lasted a little longer. So Green Day have a lot of these big, amazing songs for closing out a stadium, which is a real shame for the song Goodnight Adeline. The verses aren't too strong, but this chorus is an instant classic, and the guitar solo isn't too shabby either. It's got that saccharine sweet feeling like the song Oh Love, where I can just picture myself easily sway into this in a big crowd before stopping to scream the line at the end of every verse, let it go. Honestly, having Jesus of Suburbia right there in your back pocket, the choice is obvious as to how you're going to close your big stadium shows. But that doesn't mean that Goodnight Adeline won't be getting done dirty in the process. Halfway through the album, we get Coma City, and sonically this is a breath of fresh air before continuing. What makes it so is the tempo and those high ringing guitar notes, and again, it feels very nostalgic. Now I'm struggling to put my finger on what it makes me nostalgic for. The guitar part under the chorus is something I instantly loved, and the extended outro I really like, especially with its use of phasing. Truth be told, this is probably my favourite song on the album. Now, I said, and it turns out a lot of people have said, that Father of All Motherfuckers sounds like a bunch of car commercials. So I wasn't particularly enamoured when I saw there was going to be a song called Corvette Summer. Well, it doesn't sound anything like the previous album, but that doesn't mean I know what to make of it. First off, cowbell. Lots of prominent cowbell in the chorus, which by the way also features this very low vocal as they're singing the words rock and roll. That combined with the steady balls to the wall power chord riff makes this perhaps the most American thing I think I'll ever hear. Honestly, I think a lesser band might have gone yeehaw somewhere in the middle of all of this. What's most bizarre here is that as I was getting into the second verse during my reaction, it suddenly dawned on me what this reminded me of. Bon Jovi from about 20 years ago, early 2000s Bon Jovi. I don't mind a bit of Bon Jovi, but hearing Green Day sound like them, I don't know, it doesn't sit right with me. Suzie Chapstick is the second song in a row on this album that doesn't sound like Green Day. And I can't knock them for stepping away from their usual sound, but somehow they even managed to make this sound like a safe choice. In case you're wondering what this reminds me of, I couldn't put my finger on it, but it reminds me a lot of sort of post-Richie Manic Street Preachers, sort of late 90s, you know, This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours era. It's nostalgic, it's soft rock, and I guess it's got a lot of sweetness to it, but like a lot of the deeper cuts on, say, the DOS album in particular, I can see this one being relegated to, you know, staying on the album and not really being used in a live setting. It would be quite an obscure song, I feel. Strange Days Are Here to Stay is another song that I don't really have a lot to say about. As a pop punk song, it's a good standard, if a little bit repetitive in the verses. It's not bad, it's not boring, I wouldn't even go as far as saying it's filler, but it's not as powerful as your average Green Day song was earlier in their careers. Aside from a pre-chorus that kind of reminds me of Huey Lewis's Once Upon a Time in New York City. If you know the film Oliver and Company, you'll know what I'm talking about. And the line, ever since Bowie died, it hasn't been the same. There's not a lot here that really stands out to me. On the other hand, Living in the 20s is probably the closest thing to a filler track on this album for me. I should point out that people have said stuff about the lyrics. I am someone who always pays attention to music first and then sort of lyrics dawn on me over time, so maybe my mind will change on this one. It's odd because while this song isn't the one that I like the least, it's just the one that has the least to say musically. Honestly, aside from Billie Joe's growly vocals, which again I'm very happy to see, this feels like the brand of pop rock that easily could have come on Father of All Motherfuckers. I would even go as saying that the song Sugar Youth from that album is more interesting than this one. I can already sense now I'm going to get a lot of flack for this one, but I don't like Father to a Son all that much. I used to be a sucker for a good power ballad when I was a teenager, and I'm sure if I'd heard this song back then, I would have absolutely adored it, like how so much of the internet seems to. But to me now, it all feels so standard. It's a well-made song with all the pieces in all the right places. Heavy use of strings, an acoustic opening, a powerful overdriven lead, and lyrics that are going to make people think about their family. And I think, honestly, this is the problem for me personally. It feels about as calculated, if not more so, than The American Dream Is Killing Me. It would be tempting to link this song to something like Good Riddance or Wake Me Up When September Ends, if it wasn't for the fact that those songs had so much drive and character of their own. By contrast, Father to a Son sounds like it was kind of recycled from excerpts of All Around the World by Oasis. Feel free to explain how I'm so wrong in the comments, by the way, but yeah, that's my opinion on Father to a Son. The title track of this album may just be the most, dare I say it, boring. It feels like sacrilege to call any Green Day song boring, but then look at the song Oh Yeah from their last album and tell me that the band are infallible. The first verse feels actually quite hard to get through. You've got this very thin droning guitar and sort of distant vocals, and then that's broken up with a chorus and you think, okay, we're going to go into something else now. That was just a build up, right? But then it goes back into it. The chorus doesn't exactly make for a great payoff either, and the massive tone of the guitar solo is just too little too late to save the rest of the song. By the way, I can't put my finger on this, but I swear there is another previous Green Day song that this reminds me of a slowed down, duller version of, and if you can tell me what I'm thinking of in the comments, I would be extremely welcome, because I've try going through the entire back catalogue and I can't put my finger on what this reminds me of. I thought maybe the song Redundant, but actually that song is slower and somehow more vibrant. So in my first reaction to this album, I was kind of put off from the last few songs, honestly, to really appreciate the slow and quiet of the closing track, Fancy Sauce. But when editing my reaction, I realised I should have been more patient with it. It's definitely not the most exciting song here, not by a long way, but some of the lines are quite choice, like watch the evening news because it's my favourite cartoon. When I think back to earlier in the album, the first half of the album in particular, it's so much more frenetic and like classic Green Day. and they could easily have ended on the song Coma City, and in a way I kind of wish they had. But Fancy Sauce makes for an amazing closer, specifically because it's so slow and dreary in the start, and then in the second half it starts to build towards something. It's only 4 minutes long, but the last minute is taken up with this huge kind of wall of sound outro, lots of instruments going off, the guitar parts and the drum parts suddenly getting much more exciting. If nothing else, that right there might be the most indicative factor of what it's like to see Green Day live. And speaking of Green Day live, I want to make something very clear here. If they played any of these songs, even Saviors, in a live setting, I would be rocking out to them. They have that ability to make anything work live really well. They're just that way as a band, and they just sound so electric. I also want to make it clear that I'm comparing a lot of what goes on in this album to what has gone before. It's utterly ridiculous to think that they haven't produced really amazing tracks and albums in the past that outstripped this by quite a bit. I've already seen a lot of people, including the band themselves, saying that this could be a new classic, something that could, you know, be up there with Dookie and American Idiot. Honestly, I can't say I agree with that. The fact is that this is a band who have had their craft honed to a point of just knowing how to construct songs for a very, very long time. And a lot of this feels so calculated and safe and by the book compared to some of the risks they might have taken earlier in their career. When you look at the snarl of Welcome to Paradise, the ferocity of Hitchin' a Ride, the progressive Jesus of Suburbia, as well as pretty much any of the songs that came from those respective albums, you can see how devoid of risk this album is. On its own merit though, everything here works as it should, and it's a really solid album. I would definitely say that the first half is so much better, and then it kind of trails off towards the end. I honestly feel like it unraveled after Coma City. But then again, I'm not one of these people that's a big fan of Father to a Son, so perhaps if I was, that might change my mind about the pacing of the album generally. Finally, I said back in May last year when I ranked all of the Green Day albums up to that point that I would find a place where this would kind of slot in. Well, here it is. It's around about the same place for me as Revolution Radio, and I would say it just pushes Revolution Radio out, which was in 10th place, now going to 11th, and this is the new 10th place album. So people might say out of 14 albums that's quite low, but I liked Revolution Radio. I don't feel like the highs on Saviors are as high as Revolution Radio, but the lows aren't as low either. It's definitely more consistent. Also, this is more than just a return to form following Father of All Motherfuckers. And Green Day have proved here that they can really tap into like different eras of their career and produce new stuff with it, which for bands that have come this far and developed their sound so much really says a lot. I only wish they had taken more risks with it. So, thank you for listening to what I have to say about this album. Feel free to argue your points in the comments if you differ from me, and if you agree with me on any points, feel free to let me know which bits it is you agree with me on. I actually did want to say a few more things before I close this video. Obviously, the usual stuff. Feel free to like the video, feel free to subscribe for more retro gaming content, as well as music discussion and occasional music covers. It's touch and go as to how this channel is going to go in the next couple of months, but eventually it'll be back up and running, no problem. I'm sure of it. It may be sooner. But yes, I wanted to say a massive thank you to my parents who managed to, at the very last minute, managed to get a computer to me. I say last minute, it was, you know, the 18th of January. They got a computer to me the day before this album was released. And a huge thank you to my wife, who, without her, I would not be able to produce these videos at all, because she is just the tech whiz in our house. I also want to have a little shout out to a channel called South Africa's Legendary Game Cop. He's a guy who has been commenting on all of my posts and videos over the past few months to, you know, sort of encourage me to keep going and whatever. And I always knew I was coming back, but it was nice knowing that someone was still, you know, interested in how I was doing in between things. Feel free to go check out his channel if you're into like obscure old video games at all, because he does these amazing playthroughs of some games that I've never even heard of. And with all that being said, have a good one.